To anyone who has ordered a mail order bride, what was it like and what happened? My friend Richard has a mail order bride from the Philippines. He's a scruffy redneck long-haul trucker from West Virginia. She's tiny, slender, and 10 years his junior. At first she cooked, cleaned, and kept his bed warm. But after a few years she told him she wanted an education. He put in a ton of overtime and saved up enough to put her through college. She's a physician's assistant now and makes more money than he ever has. But she still makes him dinner and makes a point of always being waiting at the door when he gets back from a long haul. They've been together for 20 years now, and it's a joy to see them together. This is adorable to me. One of my uncles, who is Filipino, convinced one of his white coworkers to marry his 28-year-old niece who was still living in the Philippines at the time. The guy was at least 20 years older than her. The relationship was really rocky the first 2 years. She hated him, basically. But she stuck with the relationship, got him to go to church, and they were more or less together. About 10 years into the marriage the guy needed a kidney transplant. Months pass. He can't work anymore, and she's spending all her free time outside of work taking care of him at the hospital while he's waiting for a kidney. I visited one time while he was in the hospital and she broke down telling my other relatives and me how much she loved him and she didn't want to lose him. The doctors finally give him like less than 3 months to live if he doesn't get a kidney, and after a month and a half later, he got the kidney, recovered and went back to work within a year's time. At a family get-together he bragged to everyone including me about how amazing he feels and how much he thought he was dead and that he was blessed to have a new lease on life. Then a few months later I get a call from him saying that he's met someone online and that he still considers me family. In shock, I tell him I'm busy and then called my aunt, who then explained to me he found a 21-year-old single Filipina mom from Cebu and already filed divorce papers against my uncle's niece, who was almost 40 at the time. Some people are assholes. Some guy in my small hometown married a Filipino mail order bride. Guy was kind of a creep, and it didn't last. She left him and got a minimum wage job at a fishery shop, grueling work for no money. She cried when she got her first paycheck. She couldn't believe how much money it was. Really put my quality of life into perspective. I'm pretty rich for a poor person, and I occasionally remember this tidbit when I lose my way. Paychecks can be steep in the fills. There are people here that work what you consider 9 to 5s 24/7 and barely get paid more than 250 Philippines pesos every week. That's around 4 or 5 if you're American. You're right about her crying over a minuscule paycheck. Some poor peeps here aren't paid worth speep. It's why the $1 a day could change this child's life on the commercials is no joke. It really can. I was broke and living in Argentina. $1 would buy me a bag of rice and a bag of lentils. Enough food for a week. And I had to borrow that $1 from a friend on PayPal. He sent me 3. Fun times. Good for 3 weeks. Wow. My dad has a mail order bride. It feels so peeping weird typing that out. Only a handful of people know about it. He met her on a website. Flew over to visit. Was married by the time he got back. And now I have a half sister. My dad too. He was 50 something. She was 19. I was 29. Have a 4-year-old half sister I've never met residing in the Philippines. Dad's replacement kid and wife, and I've not seen a photo or heard anything from him again. My dad went to impressive lengths to start up his replacement family. He even bought the same breed of dog we had when I was a kid and gave it the same name. It's just peeping weird. My best mate's dad did something similar. He dumped his first family friend. His sister and mum moved to Texas, got married, possibly bigamously, and named the kids of that marriage the same as the kids he had abandoned. Peepers setting up franchises. I went to a college course, and one of the other students was a pretty obvious mail order bride. She was Thai, and the more we got to know her the more she shared about this relationship. She was late 20s, and he was at the lower end of 60. He didn't work, but had received some big work compensation payout, and was apparently quite wealthy because of that. She told us they met online on one of those meet Thai ladies who are just dying to be your girlfriend kind of sites. And after talking for all of 2 weeks they agreed to marry. This country is a little bit stricter about these sorts of unions, so there were some hoops they had to jump through, such as he had to go visit her for a certain amount of time in Thailand before starting the process. But essentially they were engaged after a few weeks and married within a few months. The guy essentially wanted one of those stereotypical Asian marriages, where the wife was subservient and existed to please their husband. She would tell us he would make her wait till he was done to eat, and he would only let her eat ladylike foods like salad. He paid her a monthly salary which was pretty abysmal, and she had to use that for clothing and other essentials. He also wouldn't let her go anywhere by herself, and would drop her off and turn up an hour before classes ended in case we got let out early to drive her home. I remember we had to do a group assessment, and I had given her my phone number and he forced her to delete it. I'm a female. I think the saddest part was when she asked a bunch of us if we could get birth control pills for her because her husband kept destroying her script/pills, and you could tell she was absolutely terrified of getting pregnant. The weird thing though was that she wasn't terribly bad off in Thailand. Her family was apparently quite wealthy, and she had her own home and stuff over there, but for whatever reason she didn't want to live there. Personally I would have ran the second I saw that purple-faced blob of a husband. If this situation is ongoing, you may want to refer her to a clinic where she can get an IUD. Skip class one day, go to the clinic. Skip another day, and get it put in. Very discreet. Impossible to detect. Nearly 100% effective. Edit. I was wrong. You can totally feel the string. Address that as a concern and maybe she can see her options either with a certain brand of IUD or a different method. Chances are they'll also be able to refer her to other services which could be of use. Hopefully she'll be able to get a better life than this. She may want to leave, but has no access to her passport or enough to buy a plane ticket. My girlfriend and I were recently eating at a restaurant in Las Vegas, seated right next to another couple. The lady was a 30-something Asian woman and the guy was a 50-year-old American man. They spent about 5 straight minutes with the waiter trying to order food for the woman, who didn't seem to understand they were in a place that served food. Then, once they did order, she leaned in and told the guy something we couldn't quite hear. He got up immediately and left for a bit. In his absence the woman tried to ask for something from the waiter in super beyond broken English. Waiter couldn't understand, and she just stopped talking and stared straight ahead. The guy eventually got back and put a box on Tampax on the table next to her and said very loudly, "Because I take care of my baby." She smiled and grabbed the box and started opening it right at the table. Took out a tampon, opened up the plastic, opened the tampon, and stared at the guy with a super confused look. The guy turned pale and started asking her things like, "Do you not use those? Do you use pads? Do you want me to find you some pads? For your period? Your period? You're on your period right now? Yes. The blood? Yes dear. That's your period." All the while the woman was like repeating what he was saying super loudly. Meanwhile I'm eating spaghetti like a foot away from the guy, almost shoulder to shoulder with him. They eventually left without eating or paying or saying anything. It was one of the most bizarre things I have ever seen, and I now completely assume without any other kind of supporting evidence that she was a mail order bride. For some reason I thought you were going to say that she proceeded to put the tampon in right in front of everyone. I thought she was gonna eat it tbh. My father's cousin brought back a Vietnamese wife from the war. I believe she was a prostitute. He's long since passed, but at the rare gathering on that side of the family, that woman is a peeping riot. She hugs everyone and loudly proclaims how good it is to see/meet us, and is super enthusiastic about everything. She shares no blood with any of us, and she is the happiest person to see every single family member. It was pretty damn funny learning her story after the fact. She seems like a pretty cool person. There's a great ethnography on the subject, called Romance on the Global Stage. I read it in college, and while I was supposed to be writing a paper on it, I got curious and got myself 2 foreign snail mail pen pals. All of us are female. One of them is still in France, and we still keep in touch 10 years later. The other, from Russia, married my male best friend, and I was the best man at their wedding. So the joke is that I mail ordered a bride for him. Edited to correct the title of the ethnography. Incorrectly remembered it as Veiled Sentiments. Another great ethnography. My dad had one a few years back. He met her online and flew out to get her after a while. She was a shut-in and was legitimately afraid of me because she thought I was smoking pot. Funny thing was that I had never smoked weed at the time I was 17. It was a weird dynamic. If I was home she stayed in her room, unless I had been in my room for an extended period and she deemed it safe to get food from the kitchen. My room was in the basement, just for clarification. The few times we crossed paths she would see me, gasp, and then run to her room. My dad never saw this as a problem. He basically catered to her every want and need. Also, I should mention he was 56 and she was 29. A year later I moved out. Since then she has attacked him on 2 occasions and had him arrested. Eventually he sent her back. Or maybe she left, I don't know. I no longer speak to my father, so that's the extent of my knowledge. Are you sure she wasn't a cat? Holy speep. This is how he shoulder vended the story. Eventually he sent her back to the shelter. Or maybe she left, I don't know. Just give her a ball of twine and she will tire herself out. Although my parents were always too ashamed to admit this to anyone but myself and my sister, my mom was a mail order bride about 23 to 24 years ago. This was before all the online companies that do this. So my father had to find my mother in a sort of magazine catalog of Filipino women. He sent her letters, and she replied. Over the course of a year, they finally met, and my mom moved to my dad's tiny hometown, got married, and they had 2 daughters together, one being myself. They were both looking for a better life, and someone who would treat them better than past partners had. And they both got that. Plus it turns out they both have the travel bug. So now they're retired, living a nomadic life traveling the globe, and they got more than they ever hoped for. Sure, I've always known there were some serious cultural differences between my parents that they've never been able to fully reconcile. My mom, being from a very traditional village in northern Philippines, has a hard time understanding a lot of North American norms and beliefs, and they butt heads over a lot of small things. These cultural clashes have taught me so much though, and their collective love of travel and culture has inspired me to study anthropology and travel around the globe. I can't imagine having lived in a home where we didn't eat bacon and rice, pancit and steak, or purple U birthday cakes on a regular basis. TLDR. My mom was a mail order bride, resulting in a long-term happy marriage between my parents and purple birthday cake for me. D. Read a similar story in this thread. Your sister Reddit. I think it's the same person telling the same story, just once replying to another, and once this thread of her own. Username is indeed the same. Case closed, boys. I dated a girl whose dad had a mail order bride. It took them 2 months to figure out why she wasn't learning anything from her English classes. Turns out the school had messed up and put her in German. You can't make this speep up. Could you imagine trying your hardest to learn a foreign language that's completely new to you, and the whole time everyone saying you're wrong, only to learn it was a completely different foreign language than the one they spoke?